Welcome to Psychology Today. I'm your host, Ann Morrow, and this is a show about bicycling in general and specifically about bicycle safety. Thanks for joining us. I hope that Psychology Today helps to inspire you to ride a bike and to be more mindful about bicycle safety. We try to celebrate people in our community that somehow maybe incorporate bicycling into career choices or some sort of entrepreneurial endeavor, and those that just really have a passion for cycling and support other people that are cycling and promote bicycle safety. Before we meet our guests, I want to make sure that I thank our crew in the control room. Without them, we couldn't have a show, and also our producer, Northwest Bicycle Safety Council. I am the president of Northwest Bicycle Safety Council, and we're getting ready for our 2018 events, and we're all very excited. As we speak, we've got our many hundreds of helmets headed our way to be placing on mostly children's heads here in Washington County this coming summer, mostly the spring and summer months. We'll be out and about in the community with those helmets, making sure that everyone who needs one has a helmet on their head. So we're really excited and looking forward to the summer of 2018. Our guests are Michael Sylvester, and you may remember him. He was on our show in November of 2017, and he talked then about bicycle fitting, because that's what he does, and he's definitely an expert at that. If you happen to miss that show, you can access it through the Northwest Bicycle Council website or through YouTube. So by all means, get that information about bicycle fitting from Michael Sylvester. Tonight he's going to talk to us about gravel riding. Gravel riding seems to be a real up-and-coming sport or activity right now. People seem to be getting off the road and getting onto gravel. And so I'm going to try to find out what the big appeal is. And then we're going to talk to Rachel Saathoff, our second guest. She's new to road bike riding, and in my opinion, she had quite an adventurous 2017. It was just kind of a whirlwind of activity, and I thought it would be very interesting for all of us to hear about that, all that she did, and maybe be somewhat of an inspiration to some of us to bicycle a little more and get out of our comfort zone a little bit. So let's get started. Welcome, Michael. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you. It's nice to be on the show and be able to contribute.
Yeah, well, we sure appreciate it. You're a pretty versatile guy. You really do a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So you've got a lot to contribute. So I know that we kind of covered this last time when you were a guest in November, but some people probably haven't seen that. So let's hear a little bit about yourself, a little history, and how you came to be in Portland and things like that.
So I grew up in Portland, or outside of Portland, so I've been here to see all the changes that have been happening in Portland as it grows in terms of cyclists and cycling. So that's been interesting for me. How I got involved with cycling was through my brother, and my brother invited me to take a tour with him, and we rode across the United States and then flew to Europe and rode all the way to Greece and spent the winter in Greece and then rode back. So we had a 1.5 year long adventure, and that was when I was 20 years old. So that kind of kicked off my bicycle adventures and knowledge.
What an adventure. That's a lot of people's lifelong dream to do something like that, and you kind of started out with that.
Right. That was my first exposure to bike touring. Here, let's ride across the United States.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think our guest Rachel is a little bit not that far, but just the idea of, hey, let's do this, let's do that, and you just plunge right in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you said that you started with your brother. And then how did that, I mean, it seems like that's kind of a pinnacle of riding, a tour like that. So then how has cycling played a role in your life since that point?
When I came back from that tour, I had a lot of confidence and felt good about my bike and started working in the bike industry in a bike shop. Started racing, and racing seemed easy, you know, like, hey, we're going to go ride 100 miles. Well, that's no big deal. I did that every day that we rode across the United States. So You know, it was a easy transition, and it was fun and something new to learn about, and so did that and got very involved in the racing end of it, and working in a bike shop saw that there was a need to interface the body and the bike, so bike fitting, and became involved with that, and I've been playing with that ever since.
And we talked last time that you are just like the bike fitting, that was not common knowledge, I don't think, when you were getting into it, and you helped, I think, develop that, and you got into cyclocross, it seems like, before that was really the in thing, and you got into yoga before we were all doing yoga, so you're always a couple of steps ahead, and now here you are in gravel riding.
Well, I've been gravel riding all my life.
So,
we didn't call it gravel riding, but
it wasn't a thing.
It wasn't a thing, and there wasn't a bike that we could sell you yet, but definitely it was happening.
Okay. Well, let's learn a little bit about it. So, what kind of riding are you passionate about right now? You've kind of gotten out of the racing at this point. So, what really gives you a lot of enjoyment?
Well, the racing, I'm only out of racing because it's dangerous. And when you're my age, I'm 61, falling off my bike creates problems much more than when I was 21.
Right.
I don't bounce as well. So I really love to ride, and I want to protect that. I want to preserve my health and my body. So safety is a big thing, you know, wearing a helmet and having the appropriate clothing to have a safe ride. If I get hurt now, then I lose a bunch of time, and it's much more impactful than when I was younger. So I don't race, and I ride the tandem a lot with my wife, and we do long trips, pulling a trailer and touring, but then I do daily rides. I rode from Portland out here to film tonight, and it's a commitment to health and keeping myself in shape, and still breathing hard and working hard, but having fun still.
And that really, to me, is a plus about cycling, is that it's something that you can grow old with, usually, for the most part, and enjoy. You just kind of maybe modify it, like you do many things, like you might yoga or something.
And in my fitting, that's something that I've worked really hard to help people with, is as we age, modifying your bike position so that it fits how your body's working, and so that modification is important.
So what initially drew you to gravel riding, and how did you even learn about it? What piqued your interest, since you were doing it for a while?
Yeah, so initially there was a group of racers in Portland that we all knew each other. We were all friends, and we would train with each other, and we were always looking for new routes. And someone would find a route, and okay, I've got a new ride for you guys, let's go. And they would take us on their favorite new route. And you know, I can remember Vic DeWeese, which was a rider that was a friend of mine, and he said, I have a new route for you. And we rode out to Estacada, and we got on what was called Forest Road 45, and it was paved, and it one lane, and it went way up into the woods. This is a 100-mile ride, and in the middle of this ride, there was a gravel road. You know, they just turned to gravel for about 6 miles. And, you know, we rode it on these skinny little tires and flatted a lot, you know, but it was really fun. It made that ride a whole different kind of ride, even though it was only 6 miles in the middle. So then, you know, we would look for those kind of things, you know, so we started searching out for roads that disintegrated into gravel and then went back into road again. So that was a common theme amongst us. And then, you know, cyclocross. I was a cyclocross guy, so I raced all over the United States and in Europe. And cyclocross is a actual event.
Yes.
But in a way it's similar because you're in the dirt and the mud, and so you get comfortable with the handling and how your bike moves in that dirt. So then now, you know, someone makes money, they call it gravel grinding, you know, and here's a bike, you know, this is a gravel grinding bike. So we can sell it to you. And it is really nice because the bikes are made for it. The getting away from the roads is so nice. You know, being able to do a ride and ride on the road and then hit a gravel road, and you don't go back to the paved road for 50 miles maybe. And that's amazing. You know, it's a great sport. So it's becoming very popular.
Yeah. So what are some of the popular areas to gravel ride? You mentioned out of Estacada. Where do you typically do your gravel riding?
So anywhere where there's gravel roads, you can gravel ride. And that's what's really nice, is that you can have your bike and explore. Like start on the road and look at the map and say, oh, where's this go? But I ride with a friend in Hood River, and we go through the Mosier tunnels on the pavement.
Right.
And then get to Moser, and then Dry Creek Road. There's tons of roads that go all the way back up to Surveyor's Ridge and Nebel Springs. All that whole area going up onto Mount Hood is just spectacular.
So that's not so far from here.
No.
And you brought your gravel grinder, as you say.
Yeah.
Tell us about the bike. We're going to talk about gear, but tell us about this bike and the gearing and all that. What's so special about it?
Well, you got to have for gravel riding, you have to have a bigger tire. You need a tire that can go on a gravel road and not flat so easily. So 700 by 40 is a common size, diameter of the tire. The gearing has to be low enough because there's more resistance. It's not as easy riding, and it tends to be very up and down.
Yeah.
So you have a lower gear set. You know, I've got a 34 low on the front and a 32 on the back, and some bikes even go lower than that. So you want good gearing there. And the bikes are a little more rigid in terms of durability. They're stronger. And then they have disc brakes, most of them.
I see that, yeah.
So I'm very spoiled. This bike has electronic shifting, but it's so fun. You know, you wouldn't think you'd need it on a gravel bike, but it's like, okay, this is just fun, pure fun. So
I see, and it just looks comfortable. It looks like a comfortable bike, even though it's not my bike. It just looks like you're right. It would just go on anything.
The position is a little bit shorter and a little bit higher in the front, so you're not as stretched out as a road bike. It's a little bit more comfortable because the terrain is rough, so you want a little more control.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's important for people to think about. It has a different position.
Do you see gravel riding as replacing your riding, like you say, getting off the road, not doing the road bike riding, or is it just kind of augment what you already enjoy?
It augments, but if I lived in Moser and I went out my front door and I said, okay, I can go towards Hood River, I can go the other way, I have great riding on the road, or I can go on the gravel. I'd go on the gravel because you see deer, you see coyotes, you see birds. You know, it's great adventure. And there's no cars.
Yeah.
We did up there, we did an 85-mile ride, right? And we saw 3 cars. And that was like a busy day. Like, wow, it was busy today. We saw 3 cars. So, you know, that's really nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So what a contrast, you know, your initial big ride when you were 20, but just the idea of going into racing, pretty much, I mean, I haven't raced, but I envision you heads down just looking at the rear wheel of the guy in front of you, and now you're more like, let's see what there is to see, and it probably helps your mental health a lot.
It's just so beautiful to ride those roads and get into a rhythm in the ride, and all of a sudden you come around a corner and, oh, there's a huge view of Mount Hood, you know, and you can't not look at it. It's just like, wow. And then you turn all the way around and, oh, there's Mount Adams, and you know, you have all these things staring you in the face. We live in such a beautiful area, and you know, those roads go on and on and on and up and up and up. So there are some things you want to be careful of as well.
And what are those?
Well, having the right equipment for sure, and I would say, you know, now with gravel grinding, tubeless tires are a better way to go, because then you can, it protects you from puncturing. Puncturing is when you get hurt, because if your tires go flat suddenly, you fall off your bike.
You tend to fall, yep.
Yeah, and gravel's not fun.
Not forgiving.
Yeah. Speed on the downhills, you know, you want to be careful because the surface is much more loose, and so that's an area that you have to throttle back and be mellow and realize that you can't stop as quickly on a gravel road as you can on the pavement.
And how did the disc brakes play into that then?
Disc brakes are great, they're powerful, they work well, they help, but they're still brakes.
Yeah.
You know, you just have to think ahead and be a little more cautious. Having enough food, having enough, you know, you're climbing up from Moser up to Surveyor's Ridge, and all of a sudden you realize, well, we're at like 5,000 feet or 6,000 feet. It's cold up here, and we're going to freeze to death going down. So having, you know, clothes, food, like you would on a road ride, but higher, you're out there a little more. It tends to have more extremes of temperature.
So you really have to plan ahead. You're not going to pop into a 7-Eleven and grab some water and a bag of nuts. You better think about what you're going to need.
Yeah, you got to take the stuff with you. And if you break down out there, there's nobody's going to come driving by to hitchhike a ride with.
So you better let people know where you're going, kind of like hiking. Let people know where you're going and go with people.
Yeah. During the summer, we stashed water up there.
Oh, clever.
You know, we put gallons of water in certain areas, and then we could refill on the ride. So that worked out really well.
Tricky.
Yeah.
Who thought of that idea?
Well, we from hiking, we had done that. From hiking as well.
So let's talk a little bit about the gear. It seems like you could kind of do this with a lot of bikes. Like you said, you rode on gravel with just your road bike, but it has its pitfalls, namely flat tires, and maybe not as comfortable a ride. But what do you really need to have a good gravel ride?
Well, you're right. You could do a regular road bike and squeeze a little bigger tire in there, and you'll get hooked. And then you'll go, well, I want a bike that I can do this with. So it's tire diameter, rim strength, making a bike that's tough enough to stand up to the rock and because they don't make gravel road isn't all synonymous. It isn't just like, oh, it's all the same. You're riding along and all of a sudden there's rocks, huge rocks that are really rough. Last year I broke my ribs flying off my gravel bike because both tires flatted just like that. And I flew off the bike and contacted the road and cracked some ribs. And so, you want to have the right equipment that you can take those changes and not be walking home.
Yeah. And I don't know, I was kind of doing some research. So pedals, are pedals any kind of an issue? What pedals might be best for gravel riding?
So I would recommend a pedal similar to what's called the mountain bike style pedal. I think it should be called a recess pedal, just because it's a shoe that has a indentation up inside, so it's recessed so you can walk on it.
Right, yeah.
But commonly you hear people call them mountain bike style pedals.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
Believe it or not, I ride gravel bikes on my road shoes with my road pedals, because the shoes are so much more efficient than the mountain shoes. So there's a little dilemma there for me. You can't clomp around, but they sure work better if you can stay on your bike.
Right. Do you take a different pair of shoes for, you just take your chances you're going to be riding?
Yeah. I try to stay on my bike as much as possible.
I mean, you're right. There's always trade-offs.
Right.
We have these dilemmas, like you say.
Right.
And you make up your mind which way you're going to go. What about clothing? Do you wear the whole Lycra kit, or?
I think comfort is the most important part of it, and I like to purvey to my customers in my studio that, whatever gets you on your bike and gets you out there. I wear Lycra, and I wear the clothes that you would see a racer wear, simply because they're made well and they're made for the task. So they're easy to obtain, and they work well. But you could go out there in other clothes. It's just a matter of comfort.
Yeah.
If you're wearing cutoffs, your seat comfort may not be so good.
It may not be. Maybe standing a lot.
But with the same thing in mind, I want to convey accessibility for people. Like, you could grab an old touring bike with some bigger tires and have an adventure on a gravel road, and it would be really fun.
Right. Just try to find some shorts with hardly any seam in them.
Right.
So that you don't have some seam going into your body.
Right.
Yeah, and just try to see what it's all about at the minimum.
Right.
And see if you don't get hooked.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the bigger tires, a little bit bigger. So because you might do some road riding as well. It might be a mixed bag of cycling, like you described.
Usually gravel grinding is a mixed bag. Usually you don't get the whole time on gravel. Usually you ride to the trailhead, do the trail, and then hit pavement again and come home. And that's really common. But inversely, I rode to Maupin not long ago and went up by Timothy Lake on the road bike, road bike, skinny tires, and there's about a 6 to 8 mile stretch by Timothy Lake of gravel.
Okay.
So I just had to throttle back and putt my way through the gravel, but I loved it, It's like the reverse. It wasn't my gravel bike, it was my road bike.
Yeah.
But it was a gravelly road.
And you were away from people.
And then I got back onto the pavement and went to Maupin, and everything was good. So, works both ways.
And I'm sure that you would advise wearing a helmet.
Absolutely. If I hadn't worn a helmet in my career, I would be gone, because there was a couple times where I crashed and ground the tail of my helmet enough that it would have been my head. And it wasn't somebody else knocking me down, it was me falling off my bike because the gears slipped and I went over the handlebars. And so, it was just one of those things. And, I would be gone, I wouldn't be alive. It would have ground through the back of my head. So, yeah, I wear a helmet that's, as some people think it's inconvenient, but it would be inconvenient to have a hole back there.
Yes, it would be.
So.
Very. So you kind of addressed the safety issues, that there are some safety issues in gravel riding. I mean, the whole being aware when you're descending to go a little slower, not just let loose and fly, probably not a good idea. and the equipment, that you choose carefully your equipment so that you're going to be safe.
Well, and thinking ahead, you know, a gravel loop, you're going to do a gravel loop, maybe it's 40 miles. 40 miles on gravel is like 80 miles on pavement.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you do truly 40 miles of gravel, it's like double in terms of energy expenditure.
I'm sure.
So you better have food and water and stuff, because it's gonna.
You're burning through calories and
Yeah.
and fluids. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and most of us aren't going to have water stashed around in the countryside waiting for us.
So start with a shorter ride. You know, when you're getting into gravel riding.
Yeah.
Allow yourself to do a short ride, like 10 miles.
Uh-huh.
See if you like it. See what it's like for you.
Yeah, and that's a good way to test your equipment and what you feel like you need, what food-wise, what works for you,
Right.
and whether the clothing is working for you. So just kind of, as I mentioned early on, you seem to keep evolving as a cyclist. Where do you see yourself in about 5 years as a cyclist?
An old cyclist. And that's okay for me. I just keep playing on my bike. You know, having more options. You know, we have the tandem, we have the road bike, we have mountain bikes, we have the gravel bike. So, you know, being able to change where you're going and what you're doing really helps.
Yeah.
And, you know, no cars. Cars are a good thing, but when you do a ride and you only see 3 cars, it's really nice.
That's a good day.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I asked you this last time. Do you see yourself with an e-bike in maybe 5 years? Do you think that might be something that keeps you riding to some extent?
A new bike?
An e-bike, an
an
electric bike.
e-bike.
Mm-hmm.
I don't rule it out at all. I think that what I see in my fitting work is that e-bikes help people get out there.
Yes.
And, you know, as we age, the reality is we're going to lose some of our power and our abilities. And so if people can get out there and still feel the air blow through their hair and it feels good, and they're contributing, even if it's not as much as when they were young, still a great thing. And, you know, the bike still goes through traffic so much better than a car.
Right.
So, yeah, I wouldn't rule that out at all. And they're working amazing.
They are.
We see them, you know, you're out there riding, even on the gravel bikes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and you see somebody, like, all of a sudden somebody flies by you, and you're like, whoa, what was that? And, it's a electric gravel bike.
Yeah. Well, like you say, if you've got a passion for this, as somebody told me, you know, if I've got a passion for cycling, why should I give it up just because physically I'm not quite as able to do it as well, if I can get a little assist.
Yeah, and you prepare, you know, you have the bike prepared for what you want to do, and you can carry more, so that'll be good.
Yeah, carry all that water. You can be the
Right.
Sherpa. Well, thank you, Michael, for joining us again and talking about gravel riding. And thank you for the little tips and encouragement to get out there and try it. So we're going to go to a safety video, and we'll be back with our second guest and talk about road bike riding. So let's go to a safety video.
Maybe you ride to school. Maybe you ride for fun. Either way, when you're on a bike, you want to get where you're going safely. To do that, you need to remember a few key things. Be visible, follow the rules of the road, and be predictable.
Okay, that's it, we're done. Well, not done exactly. We might have a few more things to say.
When we say be visible, what we mean is be easy to see.
Drivers should be watching for you, and they are. but do your part. Make sure your bike is ready for riding, and that includes having working lights and reflectors.
In the daytime, wear bright colors. At night, wear something reflective, either clothing or gear. And dress for safety. If you're wearing loose pants, for example, strap down the pant leg on the chain side of the bike, like this, so it won't get caught while you're riding. And wear a bike helmet when you ride. It may or may not be the law where you live, but it's always a good idea.
Of course, part of the idea of wearing a helmet is not to put it to the test, not to have a wreck in the first place. And that's all about where you choose to ride and how you do it.
Bikes are considered vehicles. So when you're riding a bike on the road, follow the same rules as car drivers do. Just like a driver, you need to look for and obey road signs and traffic signals. We're talking stop signs, yield signs, red lights, and so on. Keep to the right, but far enough from parked cars so you don't get clipped by a door that opens suddenly. Usually that's at least 3 feet.
But what happens when you don't have 3 feet? When the lane narrows, for example. That's when you need to take the lane.
Taking the lane means that you move into the center of the lane, just like a car. You should do this when the lane narrows or when you're coming up to an intersection or some other kind of turn. In these situations, the center of the lane is usually the best place to be. When it's time to change lanes, you should look for traffic, signal, and then move one lane at a time. Traffic will always be changing, so it's important to look and signal each time you want to change lanes.
Anytime you're uncomfortable with a traffic situation, you have choices.
You can get off the bike and walk on the sidewalk. You can choose a different route, one that has bike lanes, or slower traffic. Or you can use a combination of bike and transit. But no matter where you're riding, a road or a trail, always watch out for people walking. Move out of their way, and let them know when you're about to pass them on the left.
On your left.
If there's one thing drivers count on, it's predictability. So one of the best ways to be safe is to be predictable. For example, use hand signals before you turn or stop. Ride in the same direction the cars are going, with the flow of traffic, not against it. And don't assume that drivers will see you just because you see them.
You already know this part, but we're gonna say it anyway. Put your phone away while you're riding.
You don't want to be talking or texting because you need to be alert and paying attention to what you're doing. Same goes for earbuds or headphones. You need to hear what's going on around you, so leave them in your bag for later. Keep both hands on the handlebars unless you're signaling, and keep your eyes open for hazards, things like wet roads, gravel, debris, anything that can mess with your ride.
As we said up front, it really comes down to 3 things. Be visible, be predictable, and follow the same rules as a car.
Make sure that drivers can see you, that you let them know what you're about to do, and that you're following the rules of the road. That's it. Have a good ride.
We're back with Psychology Today, and that was a great safety video, and I know I always enjoy a little bit of a refresher on safety. Before we begin our discussion with Rachel Saathoff, I want to encourage cyclists to look into the future. It's February as we're filming this, and there's event rides coming down the pike here in the summertime, in the spring and summer, that are good goals to set if you want to be riding more. If you have those goals out there, then you tend to get to the gym to cross-train or get out on your bike when you can, because you know you've got that objective. So I want to mention the Monster Cookie Ride that's put on by the Salem Bike Club, and it's April 29th this year. It's a great training ride. It's a pretty flat metric century. If you're not quite ready for a metric century, you can just go to that first rest stop, turn around, and then it's about a 32-mile ride. So it starts in Salem at the Capitol building and goes to Champouy Park and back. And again, they put on a great ride. It does have lots of cookies because it's a monster cookie ride. Reach the Beach, and we're going to talk about Reach the Beach with Rachel. She did it last year. So that's May 19th this year. And it's a charity event with multiple distances. So if you don't want to ride 100 miles, you can ride fewer miles. Charity events, you have to raise money for the organization, and in this case, it's American Lung Association. And then there's Portland Wheelman's Pioneer Century. I've got the jerseys out tonight for Pioneer Century, and that's June 2nd this year, and it too has a variety of routes to do. So if you look at the web pages of these rides, you get a little more information and see what might be a good objective for you. And again, they're just great goals to set, and they're a lot of fun and well supported. I want to mention again that if you're looking to develop your biking skills, our friends at Ride Like a Girl Cycling are hosting 2 training camps, a 3-day camp in Malino, Oregon near Silver Falls in June for beginners and experienced cyclists, and a 4-day camp in Ashland in August. So you can check out their Facebook page, and it's Ride Like a Girl Cycling. And they have a lot to offer, especially for the gals. So again, here's Rachel Saathoff is joining us, and she just had such an incredible 2017 year of cycling, in my humble opinion, that I just really wanted her to share it with more people. So welcome to Psychology Today.
Thanks, Ann.
And why don't you, I'd like to kind of lay a little groundwork. Why don't you share a little history with us, how you came to be in Portland and your career and family and such?
All right, so I'm a native Oregonian, or native to the Pacific Northwest, and so I've been here almost all my life, except for a few years when I was in college.
And what kind of, where did you go to college then?
I spent a couple years at Arizona State University. I had to experience sunshine all year long. And then I came back and I finished off up here at the Art Institute of Portland and have been up here ever since.
Okay. And when did you first start riding a bicycle?
I was thinking about that, and I first started riding a bike when I was 5 years old. My parents had just built a house. They live up in Ridgefield. And our home builder, his name was Ernie Orton, he actually taught me how to ride a bike for the first time on our property. They had just laid the foundation and the pavement at the house, and I just happened to be there with my mom as they were kind of setting things up, and I didn't know how to ride a bike, and he was like shocked that a 5-year-old didn't know how to ride a bike, and he taught me right then and there.
Wow. An extra home builder, to take the time to do that.
Yeah, throwing in his last 2 cents.
What about more recently? How did you get into it?
Yeah, so I had a girlfriend of mine. She has a couple kids, and she had mentioned to me one day, hey, I'm thinking about buying a bike so I can ride bikes with my kids. And I was like, oh, that's a really great idea. Maybe I will buy a bike and we can start road riding or something like that. And shortly after, another girlfriend of mine and we had coffee, and she is an Iron woman, so she's intense when it comes to athletics. And I had kind of told her, hey, I'm thinking about buying a bike. And she said, well, why don't you just borrow mine for a little bit? She's in a PhD program, and she said, borrow mine for the summer, see if you even like it. And then let's talk about going and getting you your first bike. And so that's kind of how I got back into it.
And that was last March?
Yeah, that was 2 years ago that I started recreationally with her bike, and that was like riding 5 miles. And then I was like, I'm exhausted, we're done. And then she crashed her car and needed her bike back, and so I said, hey, I'm gonna buy my first bike, and I got one, and it literally sat in the garage all winter until I started training for the Reach the Beach.
Okay. And so let's talk about the Reach the Beach thing. Yeah. What is Reach the Beach?
Reach the Beach is a ride from Portland to Pacific City, and there's different distances. There's a 26, a 55, like an 80-ish, and then there's the Century, which is 105 miles.
So a little more.
Yeah,
You
it's a
remember
little
that.
bit more. And yeah, I initially signed up for the 26 because my longest ride had been like 5 miles. And I did it because a friend of mine, her company was sponsoring a team. And so I was like, oh, I'll sign up with your company. That'll be great. And then come to find out that nobody else in their company signed up except for me. And I don't even work for them. And so I was like, okay, well, I should probably learn how to ride this bike that I purchased and has been sitting in the garage. And that's when I went to the kickoff party. My friend and I, she had bought a bike as well, and we went to the kickoff party, and I think we were more excited about the food and free beer than actually like bicycling. But that's where I met you, and I think I went to a Sunday morning medley ride, which I think it was like 15 miles or something, and I was like, oh gosh. But I made it. I survived. I'm still here.
And you went on from there.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how you trained, is that they have training rides. The Portland Wheelmen put on training rides. So that kind of helps you build up. And how did that work for you last spring? Building up your mileage.
Yeah, so I built up my mileage. I think, I said I started around 15, and then I had maybe 2 or 3 weekends in that I had been riding when another wheelman kind of asked me like, oh, are you doing Reach the Beach? And I was like, yeah, I'm doing the 26. And she was like, why would you do the 26 when we're already riding like 20 miles this weekend? And I was like, I don't know what else I can do. Like, what are my options? And she was like, just do the Century. And I was like, yeah, what is that? And I had agreed to it before I really realized. I was like, how far am I riding? And I was like, I better practice, because at that point I don't even think I really knew how to use my gears. And the Monster Cookie ride was one of my training rides, and I remember 2 of the wheelmen were with me. You were one of them, and one was in front of me, and I think you were in front of me, and somebody else was behind me just like yelling at me, switch gears, do this, try that, do this. And I was like, oh, this is so helpful. Like, oh, this is what riding could be like if I knew how to use my gears.
Those gears.
So, yeah.
So, and then you had to raise money, right? You didn't have to raise for the whole team, just you.
Yeah, just for me. So I did a 20 for 20. So I asked 20 people for $20, and some people donated a little bit more because they extra love me. And it made it really easy. I hear a lot of people kind of struggle with doing that funding, but I was like, I'm just going to ask 20 friends for $20, and I think I raised a little bit more than that.
Good for you.
Yeah.
So it's not a deal breaker.
No,
it's very doable.
Yeah, it's very doable. Very doable.
And again, different charities are putting on these rides, so it might be for multiple sclerosis, it might be for the American lung or cystic fibrosis.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's
I have asthma, so it definitely was a good cause for me.
A little bit of personal interest there.
Yeah, for sure.
So share the experience of doing Reach the Beach, some of the highs and lows of the day. So you ended up doing the full Century. You start in Beaverton, or it's kind of Portland, and go all the way to Pacific City. So what were the highs and lows that day?
It was great. I initially thought that I was just riding with 1 or 2 of my friends, and we started at the finish line, and it seemed like we just kept collecting people as we went. And I think by the time we finished at the finish line, it was like 10 or so of us that had finished together, and we would ride a little bit, and we'd find somebody else we knew and be like, hey, come ride with us.
Cool.
And we'd ride a little bit more and find somebody else, and by the end, like I said, we had about 10 different people, and it was a lot of fun. We had great group photos, and the picture with the bike over your head. It was a lot of fun.
So
and there was great food.
Yes, there was great food to keep you going.
Yes.
So when you did that, had you ridden 100 miles before? Or was that the first time you'd ridden 100 miles?
That was the first time. I had done 2 metric centuries. I'd done the Rack Ride, which is a hilly metric century. And then I had ridden the Monster Cookie, which is a flat, sugar-filled ride. That was really awesome.
Good point. Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. So Reach the Beach was in May, and then in mid-July, you did Seattle to Portland, which is a 200-mile ride.
Yeah.
And you hadn't really planned to do it. So
No.
tell us how it came about that you even were doing Seattle to Portland.
Yeah, well, one of my friends who had rode Reach the Beach with me, he had a family emergency, and he called me and he said, "Hey, I have this extra ticket for Reach the Beach or Seattle to Portland. Do you want to ride it?" And I was like, "That's like double of what I've ever ridden before, possibly." And the clouds kind of aligned. Like, I had a friend's mom in town in Portland who's from Seattle who was like, "I'll take you back up to Seattle, and I'll take you to the start gate and everything." And the stars kind of aligned, and the next thing you know, I was at the start line at 5:45 in the morning, like ready to ride.
So again, you know, you hadn't done anything like that, and were you by yourself then? Or did you have people to ride with? Or?
Yeah, so I happened to run into two friends at the start gate, and I was like, "Oh, I didn't know you guys were riding. Hey, what's up?" But there's just so many people with STP that I lost them within the first 2 miles, and I was like, "I guess I'm doing this by myself," and that's exactly what I did.
And your intention wasn't to do it in one day.
No, my intention was not to do it in one day.
It can be a 2-day ride. Where were you planning to spend the night?
Centralia.
Okay.
The halfway line was where I had sent my bags to. And I was planning to stop there. So.
And then what happened?
And then I was riding, and I was just kind of thinking about Reach the Beach, and I was like, okay, I rode 105 miles there. I wonder, 2 months later if I can ride a little bit further than 105 miles. And I called my dad, who lives in Ridgefield, and I said, "Hey, I have this idea that if I'm feeling good, that I'll continue riding, and can you bring me a sleeping bag wherever I decide to stop?" And he's like, "Sounds like a great idea. Keep me updated." And I just kept riding and riding and riding and riding and riding. And the next thing you know, I was like, "Well, I'm like about to cross over the Longview Bridge. I might as well just ride home to Portland. So I should arrive around 9. And he was like, "What?" And sure enough, at 9:30, I rolled in, and my dad was, proud parent. He and my mom have always been kind of #1 fans, and he had his camera out and was yelling and screaming for me, and I was just like, "Get me off this bike! Just get me off this bike! I did it! I'm buying the jersey. Get me off this bike!" But it was a great learning experience and a great lesson for just mental toughness.
Yeah. So tell us about the mental toughness, because on a ride like that, and when you're plunged into something like that, you do have some bad thoughts. You know, you have some positive thoughts like, "Yeah, I can do this." But there's also the, "Are you crazy?" Yeah. So tell us about that process.
I think it's just a belief thing. I'm really a big believer in how you talk to yourself. The friend who's the Iron Woman who gave me her bike to ride for that recreational summer, she had broken her ankle in January and still did her Ironman in May. And I had met with her right before she was about to leave for that Ironman, and she's like, "I don't know if I can do it." And I remember telling her, I said, "If you believe you can't, you can't. But if you believe you can, you definitely can." And she, when she came back from that Ironman, she told me, she's like, that during that marathon at the end, she's like, you were in my head cheering me on. And so it really made me think about that, when I was finishing the finish line for Reach the Beach and STP that belief in myself and that self-talk that I was telling myself. Like, I knew I was in pain. I knew I was ready to be off that bike. But I just had to tell myself, to believe in myself. And it's that old, Henry Ford saying that if you believe you can, you can. And if you believe you can't, you're right. And I just kept telling myself that, like, you have to believe in yourself. You can do this. Just make it to the next stop. Just make it to the next rest stop, and you'll be fine.
Good for you. So did you struggle? STP, I think of you, like you say, you cross the bridge at Longview, the Lewis and Clark Bridge, and get into Oregon and come Highway 30, which is forever. Was that hard for you because it just goes on forever and you hit the Portland city limits, but you are a long ways from being finished and off that bike? Was that a challenging part for you?
Highway 30 was definitely a challenging spot for me. Like, I was uncomfortable. I just wanted to get off the bike, but I was so close.
Yeah.
But once I hit that St. John's Bridge, I was like, I'm real close. Just keep going. And I'm such a team player, and I love community and being around people that I just kind of found some people as I got closer, and I said, hey, I need to ride with you. Can you help me? And I found a really great guy that was like, I got you. I've done this before. I got you. And he talked me through it to the finish line, and it was fabulous. I had never ridden in the dark like that either, so I was so glad that I had good lights and that, I was with somebody that had done it before that I could just kind of follow him in.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What an experience. I'm so glad that you were able to come and share, because to me, those are both pretty phenomenal experiences, the way you just kind of jumped in. So what do you see yourself doing this coming year? Is this something you're going to build on, or are you moving off in a different direction, or what's going on?
Yeah, biking's my sport. I love it. I love just being outside. I love the community. I love meeting new people, but also being able to ride with my friends. So definitely going to continue to ride. I don't know if I'll do as many organized rides. Definitely going to do Reach the Beach again because the food is good.
It
is. So I'll definitely do that again. I'm thinking about doing the Cycle Oregon Classic.
Okay.
So I'm trying to talk one of my girlfriends, Carissa, into doing that with me, and I'm going to say her name on here just because peer pressure can be a good thing sometimes. So thinking about doing that, and then hopefully in 2019, the goal is to do the London to Paris.
Really?
I have a friend who had the jersey on, and I was like, what's that? And it's a ride from Big Ben to the Eiffel Tower. And it's like 350 miles.
Okay.
And that's the big goal. Because I've always wanted to go to Europe, and I think that would just be an amazing experience.
That sounds like a great objective.
Yeah.
And, like Michael Sylvester just on said, hey, just jump on in.
Yeah.
So as a woman, did you have concerns about safety? Were there things that concerned you, especially going in to Reach the Beach, riding on the road? Or here you hooked up with some guy you didn't even know in the dark of night coming in on STP, and you had this good experience. So are there things experiences you've had, pro or con?
I think the biggest thing is to just be smart. Just make good decisions, and that's the best thing you can do as female. And then just over prepare. I went to a couple different bike shops and made sure that everything on my bike was working correctly. I made sure I got a bike fit and was fitted to my bike correctly. I took a class on basic bike maintenance, which several different bike shops offer. I even took a class on how to change a flat and then rode with the bike club several times for when I got my first few flats so that they could help walk me through that process, because it's such a different experience doing it by yourself than it is just watching it. And I remember my first flat was over by the University of Portland, and it was pouring rain.
Of course.
And it was freezing. And like one of the guys, and I was just like sitting there tinkering, and a guy came back and he was like, why don't we go under that tree? And I was like, that's brilliant. Why didn't I think of that? It's just like the little things that you're like, oh, next time.
So after your big whirlwind year last year, and just kind of briefly, what encouragement would you have for others to get them into cycling? You obviously, this is a passion for you. You're just thrilled about it. What encouraging words might you have for others?
I would just say, give it a shot. Ride for a couple months. I think a lot of people give up just in the first couple weeks, because you know, your butt hurts. Like, it's a matter of fact, your butt hurts. You have to get your butt in shape in order to sit on that saddle for any amount of different distance, whether it's 5 miles, 25 miles, or 205 miles. You have to get in shape for it. So just keep going and keep practicing and find a community of people to ride with. You know, I can't stress how amazing it was for me to be able to ride Monster Cookie with people that would take the time to be with me, that are experienced people that are like, hey, try this, do this, how does this feel, do that, what do you think? That spoke huge for me in my ability to just build my confidence and keep going and keep going and keep going.
Well, good. Well, thank you so much for sharing, because I really think it's kind of an exceptional adventure of a year for you.
Yeah,
It really
was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Well, we had 2 great guests tonight, Michael Sylvester and Rachel Saathoff, that joined us and shared their cycling adventures, both gravel riding and road riding. And I hope that it was kind of inspiring for you as we look forward to 2018 and all the rides that are out there. I know personally, kind of my objective is always to be in good enough shape to do the rides I want to do, whatever they might be, whether it's just a nice club ride or whatever. If I read that description and it calls to me, I want to be ready to do it. And Rachel, obviously, I don't know, maybe not ready to do it, maybe not in shape to do it, but she just did it anyway. So more I don't know, gumption than I have. So I want to stress safety and make sure that you're wearing your helmet out there, and we're always, Northwest Bicycle Safety Council, making sure that people have helmets that need them. And so I want to thank you for joining us, and I hope to see you out on the road, and join Bruce Buffington and I out there on the road. Look for our rides at pwtc.com, Portland Wheelman. Thanks again for joining us.